Okay, the second presenter is Dr. Juni Kwon. She is a faculty fellow in East Asian Studies at New York University. Her research and teaching focus on transnational migration and development, anthropology of exchange, kinship, ethnicity and relatedness, and affect and compassion. Currently, she is completing her book manuscript entitled Rhythms of a Borderland, the Korean, the Korean-Chinese transnational commute between China and Korea, that examines the remittance-driven everyday lives of Korean Chinese who move back and forth between South Korea and the autonomous prefecture of Yanbian, China, a region with a large ethnic Korean minority that borders on North Korea. Today, she will present Borderland Dreams, Korean Chinese Migrants between Chinese Dream and Korean Dream. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kwon.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conference. It's a great honor and pleasure, and thank you, Dr. Seung-kyung Kim and Seth. Thank you so much for this detailed, careful organization for the conference. This is part of my book project, so I try to narrow down within 20 minutes. I tried to my best within 20 minutes. First, I like to situate the audience in the East Asia situation through mapping. Yanbian is a Korean-Chinese autonomous prefecture. As Shuang said, the left side is Yalu River, and the right side is Tumen River. The green part is Yanbian, the Korean-Chinese autonomous prefecture. So around 30% of population is Korean-Chinese, and the rest is Han-Chinese. The total population is about 2 million. Korean Chinese are descendants of Korean migrants who migrated a century ago, mainly from Hamgyeongbuk-do area. So then now, after a century later, Korean Chinese are migrating in a way back to South Korea as migrant workers. So today's topic is about how these Korean Chinese have formed and reformed as a particular ethnic transnational migrant working class. Tumen River, I took this picture from one of the mountains in Yanbian. As you can tell, left part is North Korea, right side is China. Left side, North Korea is quite mountainous, whereas the right side is China, is a vast farming land. This is geographical proximity and difference brought Koreans to China a century ago. So there's a popular saying that amongst the Korean Chinese old people, they heard a story about if you go to Manchuria, you will have potato as big as a baby's head. So you can see that there's a very rich soil, and then the dream that Manchurian dreamland was cultivated a century ago. Actually, Korean Chinese have become socialist subject by participating socialist revolution in China. But 1980s, China was going through economic reform and open economy. Korean Chinese were going through different winds of migration. The first wind is a market wind. So then Korean Chinese, not only Korean Chinese, also Han Chinese, they are not really supposed to, they are not allowed to move around. But through market wind, they had to travel to Shenyang, Shanghai, or other bigger Chinese cities. So they are becoming more travelers, they are open to other world. The second wind is North Korean wind, which was popular in the 1980s and late 1980s. So then from probably 1985 to early 1990s. So Korean Chinese, especially people in Yanbian, they do have kinship ties with people in North Korea. So they recuperate kinship ties with North Koreans. And yet, this North Korean wind was replaced with Soviet wind. It's more about like a larger scale business and a long-term business trip. And yet, 1992, South Korea and China, they normalized the diplomatic relationship. So all those winds were replaced with Korean wind. So today's topic is about Korean wind, and also there's another wind, which is coming post-Korean wind, Chinese wind. So they were just saying, this is like Everybody's Gone. This is a song's name, which is quite popular. I wish I could play the song, but because of time limit, I skipped the song. But as you can tell, everybody's gone, not only to South Korea, but also to everywhere. So there's a huge dispersal of population of Korean Chinese, not only from Yanbian, but also from Northeast China. So this is one of the famous essays written by Yu Yeonsan, who is an author, writer, professor in Yanbian. Borderland Dreams is a borderland ethnography and the reinterpretation of Korean dream. It explores the widespread and incessant Korean Chinese attempts to leave Yanbian to live better through the Korean wind. Korean Chinese have long believed labor migration to South Korea to be the most effective and powerful means of breaking the cycle they've been caught in as farmers and workers pursuing self-sufficient lives in a rapidly privatizing China. Yet, the Korean wind means not only the larger scale of migration to South Korea, but also the deep marks imprinted on those who do not actually migrate and on the place that is left behind, Yanbian. There are those who are waiting for someone to return, those who are relying on money sent from South Korea, those who are waiting to migrate themselves, and those who are taking over the houses, lands, and jobs left vacant by migrants. Despite the constant moving, Yanbian has not been left empty by the wind, as those who are gone have left behind families, and new people have migrated to Yanbian to fill the voids the migrants have left behind. Under the influential, transformative power of the Korean wind, Yanbian has continued to be exposed to transnational rhythm of life and transnational flow of money, thereby becoming a borderland of migration. So here, the leaving, the gone, and the left behind are still entangled and working together to create a sort of migration scape. Using bodies, money, and time as a key ethnographic lenses through which to understand the persistent migration and persistent aspiration of labor migration, and everyone connected to them. This presentation analyzes the political economy of a craze for transnational migration that has formed and reformed the Korean Chinese into a transnational ethnic working class, moving back and forth between China and South Korea. What then has this massive and persistent craze possible over the past 30 years? What enabled or establish Korean Chinese as suitable migrant workers in the China to South Korea transnational labor market? What are the means of creating or destroying the transnational relationship between those who remain and those who go, the living and the leaving, in the environment where much of the population is gone with the Korean wind? In what ways has the Korean dream has imagined, reckoned, and reevaluated over the years? And what is the afterlife of Korean dream? My argument is that the Korean dream is not only a collective anticipation of a better life as a means of navigating a rapidly privatizing China, but also a reflection of the political economy that emerged from the intersection between post-socialist China and post-Cold War South Korea. This political economy summoned Korean Chinese to ethnicize as transnational working bodies, a process enabled by particular forms of transnational money and transnational time. But this presentation also introduces a new social imperative to break the cycle of the dominant Korean dream to stop working for and under South Korean employers and capital, and to re-embrace life in Yanbian as China has emerged as a site for new economic opportunities. In other words, Korean Chinese are now struggling with competing and contentious dreams, the Korean dream and the Chinese dream. Throughout the transnational migration process, we can see that the dream does not stand still. The dream moves and changes, and sometimes stops being a dream altogether. This presentation captures a new moment of post-Korean wind, built on the hope of breaking the cycle. So I'd like to introduce the process in which Korean Dream was built and processed. So then first, Korean Dream was pursued through kinship visit, especially late 1980s and early 1990s. And the second phase would be marriage and migration, probably early 1990s and mid 1990s. And yet both kinship visit and marriage and migration both turned into labor migration. And yet the Korean government, South Korean government, did not have proper visa regulation for the majority of Korean Chinese. They ended up becoming undocumented. So in 2005, when I was actually starting my research, almost everybody was undocumented. And yet the South Korean government granted a large scale of amnesty to those Korean Chinese. So that now, Korean Chinese belong to deportation regime before 2005. After 2005, they belong to the freedom of movement. And yet, in order to get the amnesty, they should follow this rhythm of migration. They have to leave Korea 1 year, stay in China, and back to Korea to work for 3 years. And after 3 years, they have moved back to China a little bit and back to Korea for 2 years of working. So this working visa allows Korean Chinese to have 1-3-2 rhythm of migration. So in that sense, migration is free at the same time, trapped. They're included at the same time, excluded. So we can see that, if I can simplify, so then Korean Chinese, Korean wind is a kind of overlap between privatized China and global post-Cold War South Korea. So here that my examination is about post-Korean wind that I encountered toward the end of my research in China, around 2008 and 2009, and I keep following up research since then. This paper sets out to document the moment of post-Korean wind by catching the emerging hopes and frustrations, anxiety and regrets concealed behind the rosy scene of economic development. My particular ethnographic focus is on the widely circulated re-evaluation and rethinking of the gust of Korean wind that swept over individuals, families, and Yanbian society in general. Some migrants believe that they achieved the Korean dream, while some do not. Some are still pursuing the dream, while others done with it. Some are missing their time in South Korea, while others lost the memory, as captured in the popular saying. They say, I would not even pee toward the South Korean side. 한국 쪽으로 오줌도 안 눈다, in Korean. Korean Chinese migrants do not celebrate the Korean dream as they did a decade ago. Korean Chinese migrants and Korean Chinese society have started critically evaluating and reflecting on what they have done, what they should have, what they should not have done, and what they will do with respect to the Korean wind now and in the future. A common notion has emerged from the narrative of re-evaluation. So when I was doing research, a lot of re-evaluation of Korean dream. So you should not go to Korea, you should stay in China. So there are like a lot of debates about Korean dream. 20 years ago, Korean dream was the default taken for granted dream is the only way for you to escape from the poverty or escape to a better life. But when I was doing research in 2008, which is the year the financial crisis happened in the United States, that hit Korea, that hit EMBN, that hit China very dramatically. So then a common notion has emerged from this narrative of re-evaluation, that those who did not go to South Korea have become much better off than those who did. This widely spoken sentiment implies that mobility signifies lack, whereas immobility is a marker of economic affluence and social stability. So there's a lot of derogatory view to those who have gone to Korea. So then you are going to Korea as a dagong, as a worker, so then you cannot come back to China as affluent, stable person. The emerging discourse contains a cautionary element. It encourages the Korean Chinese not to move anymore, but settle in China. Local newspapers and Korean Chinese blogs have advertised and celebrated the stories of those who have achieved great business successes without going to South Korea. These stay at home, these stay in China. Entrepreneurs offer public lectures and attend social meetings to share their experiences and know-how. Particularly popular are the stories of those who have made dramatic life change from rural farming to owning restaurants, karaoke, bars, massage parlors, clothing stores, and so forth. The media does celebrate the clever use of skills acquired by migrants in South Korea, where they worked as dagong, physical workers. But the obvious message in this coverage is that Korean Chinese should stop working under South Korean capital as a dagong, as that does not have a promising future. They should instead become entrepreneurs and bosses themselves and manage their own money, businesses, and futures. Through numerous classes and social gatherings, Yanbian's new discourse of entrepreneurship channels ideas and methods of self-development and self-improvement into a compressive program, a kind of government of a self for ambitious individuals. While exploring the post-Korean dream phenomenon, I developed ethnographic analysis on the predominant weighting created by temporal gap and constant hesitance between the mobile and the immobile, the living and the leaving. Sometimes the former migrants are waiting to leave or waiting for someone to return to live together. Sometimes they are moving between different modes of being, getting ready to leave or breaking the cycle to leave, getting ready to leave. So here the leaving and the leaving, the modes of being is a kind of move back and forth. So which is a better choice? My point is not to suggest these are two separate modes of being developed through the course of a transnational migration, but to highlight these are overlapped modes of livelihood cultivated by transnational commute in the region, like a 1-3-2 rhythm. By examining the multiple temporal embraces, the living to live or the leaving to live, into Yanbian daily livelihood, I argue that the overlapped temporality has a deepened interconnection between the mobile and the immobile, the living and leaving, the moving and the leaving behind, both of whom have become interdependent parts of the remittance-driven transnational economy. So, sum up. So, 2005, Korean Chinese start beginning to belong to a free movement regime. So on the one hand, Korean Chinese try to participate in the migration circuit. On the other hand, under Chinese Dream, they try to break the cycle of the migration circuit. So on the one hand, Korean Chinese, they're consolidating the migration cycle. On the other hand, Korean Chinese are breaking the cycle. So here that this tension between consolidation and breaking the migration cycle, we can see that multiple migration happen like this. So I think that actual migration happen much more complicated than this though. Yanbian Korean Chinese are moving out not only to South Korea, but also to Japan and other Chinese larger cities. And also, since Yanbian is kind of vacated by Korean Chinese moving out, Han Chinese are moving in to serve the service industry. Massage parlors, karaoke, restaurants, a lot of Han Chinese migration is happening in Yanbian. And also, lately, a lot of North Koreans are coming up to serve service industry in Yanbian too. And also, North Koreans are moving to South Korea as a refugee. So there's this consolidation of a migration cycle, and also there's a breaking cycle. This is a tension not between Korea and China, but also it provokes another migration like this in the region, and the population movement across East Asia has changed dramatically through Korean Chinese migration and Korean Dream. I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much.
I would like to open the floor for questions.
Thank you for your talk. I have a question about the perception of the migrants, the ones who do end up staying in South Korea. Has it changed as Korean-Chinese relations have improved? Because there's always been this perception of, I guess, Joseonseok as being more or less criminal elements in Korean society. Has that changed?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Korean Chinese migrants have, so there are two perceptions, right? So Korean Chinese perception of Korea and Koreans' perception of Korean Chinese in two ways. Actually, there are a lot of movies about Korean Chinese because the Korean Chinese are the primary migrant group in South Korea, and that we really have to live with them. So if you go to Korea and eat in restaurant in Korean, and maybe Seoul or wherever, so it's almost impossible for you not to encounter Korean Chinese ladies working in restaurant. So in that sense, the encounter is very, very common. One of the new perception or new movement is that Korean Chinese are becoming, they are participating in the civil action and civil activities, and they are not really applying for Korean citizenship, but they try to be part of the residence and citizen-like life. So then, it's a two different thing in terms of a legal relationship with Korea. Probably they still have a Chinese citizenship and Korean citizenship, Chinese citizenship, but in terms of culturally or their residential place, they try to be part of Korean life. So in that sense, they are becoming more part of Korean member, but still they maintain the belonging or in a relationship with China too. So again, Korean Chinese are still in between Korean Dream and Chinese Dream in many ways.
Thank you very much for the talk. This is a very fascinating ecosystem of flows here. I'm curious when it comes to remittance flows for those who've gone to South Korea or Japan as they make their wages and transmit back to relatives. How is that working in terms of the socioeconomic standing of Korean Chinese who remain? Are you documenting this type of remittance flow, or is it the type of little migration out and separate lives and a different type of unique existence in different societies?
Yeah, actually, that's an excellent question that tells about what's happening behind this map. In terms of flow of remittance, mainly coming from South Korea to Yanbian, but it's not really between Yanbian and South Korea though. So then a lot of Korean Chinese parents are working in South Korea, their children are working or going to school in Beijing or Shanghai, and then they buy a house, they get a job there. In fact, in China, because of hukou system, household registration system, they cannot move, and yet they have money or they have a job. They could have a new life in different cities. So in that sense, the remittance enables something impossible, which is migration to bigger Chinese cities. And also Chinese cities is a better opportunities than Korea if you go to Korea, you're still working as a dagong. So then I, as a child of migrants, I don't want to repeat, I don't want to reproduce my parents' life anymore. So in that sense, that remittance flow to Yanbian, that enable Korean Chinese to disperse to other Chinese cities. I think the same case is Japan too. So then a lot of Koreans are working in Japan because of the language proximity too. So especially Northeast China, Korean Chinese who went to Korean Chinese ethnic school, they are studying Japanese as a second language instead of English. So then because of that too, so then a lot of Koreans are working in Japan. So I think that the remittance is not just a unite direction, so that enable another dispersal of population.
So my question is, it goes back to the first question about perception. But I'm more interested in the perception or the experiences of these Korean Chinese migrants in Korea with other migrant workers, right? So in the past decade, there's been an influx of migrant workers from Southeast Asia, for example, right? And the formation of the Migrant Trade Union. And what type of interactions do they have, formal, informal, with the Migrant Trade Union, with other migrant workers? Do they perceive them in a similar way to the ways Koreans perceive them, or what type of interactions do they have?
Yeah, that's another great question that that allows me to tell about the migration scape in South Korea. The Korean Chinese are kind of tricky in that they are Korean but not quite. But another migrant workers, they are migrant workers, they're foreigner. So here they are Koreans but not quite Korean. So for example, in Korea, multiculturalism is really big. Since 2008, a lot of marriage migration is boomed in South Korea. The Korean government had to deal with these foreigners in everyday life. So here that multiculturalism has some, that under multiculturalism theme, they do have some kind of festival. So they're like people from Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines. So they're like a different booth from different countries. And yet, Korean Chinese, do they belong to that booth? So Korean Chinese are not quite multicultural. At the same time, they're part of multicultural. So in that sense, Korean Chinese are kind of between borderline. They're in their homeland, but at the same time, they are in a working place too. So how can we juggle with this kind of like working homeland and the Korea as a marketplace rather than simply homeland? So then in that sense, the Korean Chinese are kind of confuses and complicates the scene of multiculturalism in South Korea.
My grab of the mic to ask a question. I'm really curious about the reasons for the post-Korean wave. Was it reflection, realization, reassessment of what had happened during the Korean wave, or was it more to deal with the economic growth of China, for example, or some other geopolitical reasons? I
think that's both. The post-Korean wind was not really strong, probably before the financial crisis. But financial crisis, when Korean Chinese is going through financial crisis, the currency rate is really dropped. So then probably the amount they are making is the same, but actual sending money, remittances, is half. So then like Korean dream, should I keep dreaming about this? So I am making half. So there's a turning point, critical turning point through financial crisis. So here that the nature of money, nature of remittances, are very fluctuating, unstable money. Do I have to rely on this kind of money or not? So then here, Korean Chinese migrants' children, so they rather dream in the Chinese cities. They try to participate in like another business activities in larger Chinese cities. Probably Yanbian is very small and parochial, and also not so much industry in there. So then a lot of people move out following the new opportunities. So in that sense, I think that both cases are applied to the Chinese dream.